So welcome to the Virtually Agile meetup. I'm your host today, Fred Deichler. This is a meetup that Chris and I host regularly. We want to bring people in to share their knowledge and experience with the Agile community. Today, we are very lucky to have a person I've known I've on and off for about a year through another group, Jennifer Fields. She's the Chief Delivery Officer at Ackland Avenue in Nashville, a custom development firm. She's been part of many layers of leadership since being a software developer too, and has a unique perspective that allows her to bring radical empathy and real life work experience to those she leads and coaches. Jennifer has a passion for leading individuals, teams, and organizations and rediscover their why and reclaim the joy of working to their full potential. And Jennifer here today is going to talk to us about coaching boldly, down, up, and sideways. Jennifer, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to attempt to share. So we're going to see how great this system is really quickly, or how smart I am. One or the other is going to come to light pretty quickly. So full disclosure, this is the first time I'm using Butter. So bear with me. So welcome. As he said, I am Jennifer Fields. I do reside in a little town outside of Nashville. No one wants to actually live in Nashville, thanks to the tourism. And Coaching boldly is one of my real passions for helping people learn to do this for multiple reasons that I'll get into. But I would love for you guys to give me one or two words in the chat of what are some characteristics, words, phrases that you think of when you hear bold. Someone is going to be bold, or I'm going to be bold, or she was bold. What do you hear? What comes to mind when you think of that? When they think of that term? Ooh, good. Brave, bravery, fearless. Love it. Truth, confident, authentic. Oh, I love that word. Yes. Psychological safety. Oh, good, Fred. Forthright. Awesome. So you guys are on it. When I looked up a few definitions, I came up with these, and you've covered all of them. You see a lot of brave. It's very much an action. Um, the not the lack of fear, but moving forward in spite of the fear, right? Not being held back. Courage. So yes, absolutely. So in hearing all of those things, um, how many of you can identify with resisting or holding back on being bold? Because I know I have. And so I'd like again for you to be in the chat giving me some reasons or instances or situations that would prevent you from being bold, would stop you, maybe have you kind of shrink back a little bit and not move forward as boldly, courageous, brave as you would like. Culture, boy, that's a good one. Unsafe environment, yes. Reporting for being bold, yeah. Limited experience, oh, that's a great one. Fear of repercussions, right? Speaking truth to power when they control your career, absolutely. Imposter syndrome, good one. You guys are making my job easy. Unfamiliar environment. I wish I had actually taken that into consideration sometimes. Maybe I went bold too soon. Lack of self belief. Yes. Career limiting move. Yeah, absolutely. So what you will notice in all of these is they have an underlying reason, and it's fear. Speaking from my own experience, anytime I have held back and not been bold when I thought I should be, it was rooted in fear of some kind. And so, whether that is fear of loss of employment or revenue, right? If you're a consultant, you don't want to be seen like the people said that you're new, right? So you don't want to be seen as confrontational, rude, mean right out of the gate. Being found out, imposter syndrome, all of those things roll back up to fear. And so I kind of broke these down and taking them one at a time. And again, this is based on my experience, not only personally, but also I don't go a week without coaching someone, whether it's someone in my organization or just one of my clients that I coach, the topic of being bold and them they're needing to step forward and be bold doesn't come up. It's a weekly coaching topic and leadership topic. So I put this together to try to start a conversation and help folks to kind of look at it and maybe make it a little less scary, and gain some techniques for trying to make space for you to be able to be bold and show up in a bold, courageous way. So the first one I'm going to jump into is loss of employment. That is a biggie, absolutely. And I would never tell someone to to risk their employment, right? We don't want that. The next one that we're going to cover is the confrontation and rude, and the third is being found out or imposter syndrome. So loss of revenue. I've been here. And the irony of this, you guys, is my experience has been when I have held back and not figured out a way to tell the unvarnished truth and be bold, it has cost me something anyway. And what I mean by that is I have witnessed and actually experienced where someone taking it safe, resisting speaking up, has ended up losing their job anyway as a result of that. And so, although we don't want to go crazy and risk employment, there is a way. It's not all or nothing. Is my point. You don't have to. The only way to save your job is to not hold back. I've joked, and I know for those of you who know Bob Galen, he tells some of the same stories where we have made a lot of money following folks who weren't completely bold and truthful and open, right, and blunt in some cases. And so we ended up getting hired because of that. And so I know it can be difficult feeling safe. We've all been there. And you're not guaranteed that those leaders are going to make you feel safe, right? Or give you a safe environment. So trying to figure out how to help yourself be able to show up in a bold way. So what's worked for me is building trust. To the person who said you're new, 100%. I made the mistake once of going in and on like day 3, I was really bold and it took months to build trust. I was right. It was truthful, but it was not the right time. And so it didn't land. It wasn't effective because I was bold before I had built any relationship. So building trust will help you feel safe, but it will also help your audience feel respected and be able to hear what you're saying. So building relationship, building trust, number 1. Pace yourself. Again, I love the fact that someone says, you just started. Please, please, please know that when you are making change, when you're trying to help people uh, with anything that's a difficult transition or a challenge, right? Which that's what we do, right? Is we're challenging the status quo. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Take your time. Plan your moments. Don't feel like you have to say it all in one meeting. And I have found for myself, pacing myself and giving myself permission to come back, right? That it doesn't have to, we don't have to solve it all today, the first week, is again, helps you to feel safe and being bold. Dojo practice. This is a big one. If you guys, I know people hate role play. So many people hate role play. I hated role play. I used to make fun of people who did role play. I was that person. And then I met Bob Galen, and now I'm a card carrying member. And you can even dojo practice now with Chat GPT. So if you don't want to deal with a human, right, and you want to just test it out, you can actually do practice coaching sessions and conversations with Chat GPT. And you can tell it to be a jerk, right? And it will. So the key is if you practice it and it's not the first time you're saying it, you have a chance to kind of practice your phrasing so that, again, the person who said authentic, that is such a key to communication. It can't be someone else's words. It needs to be your authentic words. So saying it a few times and hearing it in your head and hearing your own voice will really help you hone that message so that it's being bold will be productive and not risk your employment. And then the last thing, respectful challenge. One of the keys that I do is I will often write down what I'm going to say and then try to take all of the words that might be emotionally triggering out. And I can't do that on the fly. So that's where pacing yourself, right? If you feel like you need to say something, but it may be really tough to hear, uh, don't say it. Don't take that moment to say it. Schedule a next meeting and then go away. Think about how you're going to say it. Look, are there any words in there? Run it by someone, right? Phone a friend. Because the key is you want that communication to be as successful and productive as possible. But not saying it's not an option, right? That's we are just to challenge, right? And so, but you can do it in a respectful way. Oh, what I would have given to understand or know any of this when I was in my 20s. So, any questions on that? Comments?
Yeah, as you're going through that, Jennifer, it reminded me of this phrase that popped through my head for the past few years, which is like, um, does it have to be said? Probably yes. Does it have to be said by me? Maybe not. Does it have to be said by me right now? Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Huge thing to like kind of slow down and also validate your observations. So these are all really good. In your story about the build trust, I will say my first week at my current organization, I did schedule a meeting about a project that was going off the rails. Um, it didn't burn me at all, so I'm guessing it was pretty safe there. But in retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have been as bold in my first week.
Yeah.
um, we do have a couple questions from the audience. We were up for Gail. You had a question. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, sure. So, I have a question about it's loss of revenue or employment. Sometimes it's not loss of employment, but you're just so tortured in your job. You, you're constantly getting feedback. Well, she said this, she did this, she did. So you may not lose your job, but you're constantly under pressure because of sort of that. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's not as far as losing employment, but your unemployment is just um, it's just unstable, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And getting labeled, I felt this sometimes where when you're the only person speaking up, you kind of get labeled as the squeaky wheel or the problem. And again, that goes back to one of the things that Fred said, does it have to be said by you? And sometimes what I have found is because I was always the one saying it, I wasn't leaving space for other people to step forward and have a voice. And so sometimes you have to realize this again, pace yourself and step back. And often the boldest thing to do is to be silent and let other folks step forward. Because I've experienced that as well. I would also say building relationships with folks and choosing your phrasing helps there. Uh, if I don't practice my phrasing because I'm a very blunt, straightforward person, I think in bullets, and I'm pretty. I usually say everything that I think if I don't have that regulator on. Um, it is not received as well, and it's off-putting. It can be off-putting. Whereas if I just take a pause and go and sort of write it out and think through and think about how does that sound or how's that going to land, then when I have the conversations, they're less frequent, right? So it's less noise, but more importantly, it's not as triggering. So I would suggest that you look at when you're speaking and when you're saying things, to look at it from, are there any dynamite words, right? Are these going to be explosive, right? And can I replace them with a more productive or constructive or just neutral and still get the same message across.
It's a good tip. Reminds me, anti-patterns is a dynamite word in my organization, so I have to look for a different word. Victoria, you have a comment. Go ahead, unmute and let us know.
Yes, I do. And you kind of said it just now, choosing your words, know your audience. And if you don't have the background or don't have the data, that's where you step back, to Fred's point. Does it have to be said right now? Am I ready to say this right now? Some things seem like it's just common sense, but you still have to do your research or at least understand what you're talking about before you step out in that meeting with half the C-suite in it and say, yeah, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, it's definitely
absolutely.
about choosing your words and noting your audience. So thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Mike, last question, then Jennifer can move on.
Yeah, I'm hoping you guys can hear me because my
Yeah, we
setup's
can hear you.
good. I'm just wondering whether, although everything that everybody is saying is very pragmatic, it sounds like pragmatic caution as opposed to boldness.
It can sound that way, can feel that way, even, Mike. I think it's a balance. So here's an example of what I'm saying. I went in, I was a consultant, I was hired by a guy they were struggling. They had been trying to move to Agile for about 6 years, and I was like the third or fourth coach, a consultant that they had talked to. I didn't know that at the time when I went in. And, he started the meeting by saying, if you ask me one powerful question, you're fired. I have been powerful questioned to death. I don't know what Agile is. I need help. I need someone to tell me what to do. That's how it started. And you can imagine I had lots of thoughts at that point. But I went in and he had a very tight timeline. I mean, he was raw. He'd had so many negative experiences. And when he started talking about timelines, he wanted the whole organization transformed in 6 months. Right? At that point, I could have said what everybody on this call is thinking, right? And which would be factual. But instead I said, well, I'd love to explore like what is behind the timeline. Is it just frustration on your part and wanting it to be finished? Or are there revenue, what, from a leadership's perspective, what's driving that timeline? And he just said, I'm just tired of this. We've spent so much money and time. We've gotten no results. It was just pure frustration. And now at that point, I could have explained to him that I'm a human being. I don't transform anybody. That's not my job. I could have said that the transformation is never done. It's never over. So a timeline's ludicrous. All of that would have been true, but it would have been, it was the wrong time and the wrong language. So I said all of those things in a very bold way, but in a way that didn't trigger him. I said, I completely understand where you're coming from. And I applaud you for even have the fortitude to try again after what you've been through. But I will also tell you that, I will hold myself accountable to providing all of the support to allow everyone in your organization to decide to change and to look at working in a different way that will drive revenue and growth. But I can't do that change for them. And that the person most responsible and who can have the most impact on how they change or if they change is him. And that I would be there locked arms with him. No powerful questions. I'll be right beside him, helping him to lead his organization through this change. Done. I got the job. We worked really well together. But I knew going into that, Mike, that Agile triggered him. God knows, it's like you were afraid to ask a question for a while, right? Because is any question going to be perceived as a powerful question? But I couldn't let that sit, even if it cost me my job, because those were deal breakers. I was not going to be successful if I signed up with someone that thought I could transform his organization. Does that make sense? So it's being bold, but picking your time and then choosing the language that will allow that boldness to be received in a productive way.
Yeah, so I think setting and managing the expectation that he has, I think, is bold.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have said that you paced yourself in that situation, which is good
No,
because it's exactly what he asked you not to do.
yeah. And isn't that the fun part of our job, is that you've got to be able to pivot. It's a dance. Leadership is a dance because you are working and investing in human beings, and they are never the same. Even the same human being is never the same, right? Because we're always changing. So that's what makes it fun to me. All right. Thank you guys. What a great group. So the next, imposter syndrome. So if you haven't suffered from imposter syndrome, I'd really like to get to know you because you're a unicorn. This is a tough one. For those of you who don't know, imposter syndrome is simply when you don't think you're worthy. You get somewhere and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to find out that I really don't belong here. I'm not smart enough. I'm not qualified. Who am I to tell or talk to anybody? It's that little voice in your head that keeps you from going forward, from moving, for jumping in. I say there's two types of fear. There's the fear that keeps you from jumping off a cliff, right? That life-saving fear that's embedded in you. And then there's the fear I see it as, in most cases, destructive, that just holds you back. A lot of imposter syndrome, I think, would fall into that. I had not, I'm a extrovert. Like, my family are extroverts. We just are off the scale. And so I just have never had a lot of experiences where I walked in and felt like an imposter. But about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I guess now, Bob Galen reached out to me, who, if you guys don't know him, you need to get to know him. He's amazing. And I'm a groupie. I've got the t-shirt. He reached out and said he was writing this new book on coaching, and he would like for me to participate in writing a couple chapters. And you guys, I remember that phone call. My head just grew, like it was like the Grinch. My head grew like 4 sizes. And it coming from Bob, I was like, oh my gosh, totally. I will do this. I'm so excited. This is going to be great. It's going to be amazing. I have a double degree. I have a degree in literature and computer science. And I was like, yes, I'm finally going to get to use that degree that I've never used. And then at 3 a.m, I woke up in a cold sweat thinking, oh my God, I can't write chapters in a Bob Galen book. Like, why would anybody want to read what I say? And then what if they read it and they make fun of me? What if they realize I've never written anything? I don't even blog. And I'm not kidding. So I waited because I knew Bob got up really early. So 6 a.m, which was 5 my time, I called Bob Galen to tell him that I realized my schedule was just too full and I couldn't write this book. And he said, you're full of crap. I know better. You're writing the chapters. That call was repeated about 8 times over the next 3 months until he said, Jennifer, I'm not going forward with the book unless you participate. You've got to get past this. One of the greatest gifts he's ever given me. Now I can fully empathize with people who say they have imposter syndrome, feel it. I've witnessed it. I can really empathize now. It changed me. I can say, out of all my accomplishments, those 2 chapters I'm the most proud of, because it was brutal, you guys. I mean, absolutely paralyzed with fear. And when he said that it was done and we'd edited, and I felt like I was going to throw up, because it was going to be put out to the world. And what if people thought I was stupid? What if they didn't like what I wrote? That was a new feeling for me. And I'm so grateful for that experience because it was an amazing amount of growth, but it allows me now to empathize with more people in a greater way. And I'm so thankful for Bob for not letting me quit, and for helping me. So one thing that I will tell you, if you are not certified, right? That's a big one. Oh, I don't have the certification. I have the education. Go get it. Find it. Do online classes. Knock that out. Get it out of the way. Don't let imposter syndrome hold you back. What I did to write the book is I created training material first about my chapters. It was a way to get me to feel like an expert. If you were if you're wanting to dabble in AI, right? Wanting to learn something, wanting to be able to talk intelligently about AI, get a PowerPoint deck or a Google deck, whatever you prefer, and create training material to explain AI to a 5th grader. Anything you need to feel more confident about, create a training deck for. It's magic. Train yourself. Perfect way, cheap, inexpensive, awesome. And then the other one is borrow courage. I borrowed courage from Bob. I would call him and say, Bob, and he was like, Jennifer, you're Jennifer freaking Fields. You have got this. I handpicked you to write these chapters. You're amazing. You're the exact person that needs to speak to this. Borrow courage. Find your tribe and let them support you through your imposter syndrome. And then you can borrow my chant. Like if I start feeling like I can't, I just say, I'm Jennifer freaking Fields, right? I'm all that. Borrow that confidence. Another big thing, if you guys haven't done the coaching wheel, oh my gosh, go work the coaching wheel. It's a great way to figure out where to invest your time and sort of where you find your bliss, but it will help you feel better. When you start really thinking about what all you know, it will help you get past imposter syndrome. And then the last thing, find your complement. You guys, you don't have to be all that. You just have to know people that can fill the gaps and then work beautifully with them. Any questions on that? Anything? Yes, Uncle Bob. I love me some Bob Galen, man.
I didn't mention that at the beginning, but that's where Jennifer and I met through Bob Galen's meetup group, the Moose Herd. So after you do your coaching wheel, if you're really interested in investing in yourself, look to join the Moose Herd.
Absolutely.
So I have another idea for you if you want.
Sure, yes.
Pebble in a pond.
How do I join it?
Start with people that are close to you. Talk to them, and then slowly but incrementally expand the conversation out to people that you do feel uncomfortable with.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great way to safely kind of get into and remove it, especially if it's about a certain topic. I like that. Absolutely. Having a network of people that genuinely are invested in you and care about you, and that you can serve as that to them is so invaluable, you guys. It's just absolutely priceless to have that. Thank you, Mike. All right, next one. Avoiding confrontation. I was being nice. So those of you from my generation, remember when Harry Met Sally, Bruno Kirby's holding a wagon wheel table, that when he asked Billy Crystal the first time if he liked it, Billy Crystal said yes. And then minutes later admitting that it was the ugliest table in the world and that he was just being nice. And, there's a lot of places and a lot of times to be nice, but when you are coaching, when you are working and leading in an organization and they are paying you for your talent, your skill, you can't always be nice. You can't always avoid the confrontation or avoid looking like you're being rude. Again, you don't have to be a complete jerk, but I've, if any of you have read the book Radical Candor, I have been guilty of staying in the ruinous empathy quadrant because I just didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. And in the end, it's you're doing more damage by not being truthful. I had a client who I started working there, and they'd spent a lot of money and had not really seen any value. And it came down to the guy that they'd hired was a great person, super nice, but was so non-confrontational. And then to make matters worse, they were non-confrontational. So they couldn't hold him accountable or have any kind of honest conversation about the work product and the outcomes. And even though he saw things that needed to change and needed to be called out, he was too nice to do it. And so that was a perfect example to me of how much it cost that company simply because the leaders weren't able to handle and manage confrontation. So I see I coach a lot of people who this is a big problem. They get into this field and then they don't feel any level of comfortability with wading in to contention or challenging the status quo. And, that is our job. And learning how to do that better is absolutely a requirement. And so, again, same tips in a lot of cases. I dojo, man, when I've got, especially if it's high stakes, when I'm meeting with C-level folks, when I'm meeting, so now it's been a nice little, let's talk about having empathy again. When I moved to the C-level, the first 6 months, that was a real change for me. It was a real challenge. In learning to have conversations with your peers at the C-level and wading into that kind of conflict and confrontation. Again, it was a learning exercise for me, but to not do it is not acceptable. That's not going to get the results we want either. So anyone else struggle with this and do you have any tips? I dojo and I write it out and practice. I practice the phrasing. I also have I don't know if you guys do this, but I keep a list of known triggers for the people that I work closely with. So I can frame things and prepare conversations, understanding where they are, and have better conversations with them. Anyone? Yeah, pick your battles. Yeah. Isn't that a big one though? I think when I was younger, I was willing to die on every hill. In my 20s, every hill. Like I made no differentiation. I had the analogy of, if there's two ways to go across a field or through a field, I would just get on the bulldozer and go right through the middle every time. And I thought it was a waste of time to walk around it, right? Even though you would leave things in better shape, I didn't have time for that. I felt like if it was right and it was truth, I should be able to just say it. And if they couldn't take it, that was their problem. And that was me in my 20s. Thankfully, I have learned and changed. And now, to your point, pick your battles, pace yourself, but shrinking away completely. And I have done this. I have been guilty of this. Sometimes I'm just tired. I don't have the energy, I just don't want to deal with it. But letting it go on for too long never ends well for anyone.
Yeah, there's another.
Have any of you ever been on the other side of this, where you're in the quadrant of ruinous empathy, where you find out that people have thought something and just didn't want to say it to you because they were afraid or avoiding dealing with you?
Yes.
Would anybody who says yes, would you back up what I'm saying? I've been on the other side of that. And my first question was, why didn't someone tell me? I would have always rather heard the truth as soon as it was known. So I would have the opportunity to make it right. Finding out you're the last person to know is gutting. And so that in itself will keep me from avoiding things for too long. All right. Yeah. Yes, I love it. That is a very my family, again, because we're all extroverts, we joke that that's a test. A real friend will not let you walk around with something in your teeth or your zipper down. And that's like the litmus test in our family, because you just can't, don't be that person, right? So but sometimes it's hard. But yeah, I love that. I'm gonna steal that, Rebecca.
I see Mike has a question. Is that still a question, or is that put your hand down? Okay. All right.
I left his room crying once after a team held back until they couldn't anymore and let me have it. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm telling you, you just have to do that. I've been on both sides of that. So I've been the person who everybody was avoiding, because again, I just told you what I was like in my 20s. Do you blame them? You know? Uh, and then I've had the person that when I finally talked to them and they realized that everybody was thinking that for months and they hadn't been told, the guy just looked at me and he said, I've never been more humiliated or hurt. Now that was hard, being a leader and hearing that your lack of leadership has led to someone feeling that way. That I wrote down. That's a part of my journey, because I don't ever want to feel that way again. So I talk about my bold journey. I'm big on journeys, you guys. I think my greatest leadership tool in my toolbox is my story and my experience. I think it helps me to maintain a great level of empathy, and also helps remind me where I've come from so that I can continue to improve and move forward and continue to be bold. So as you can see, I always do a timeline, and mine is longer than this, but I just gave you the highlights. Each one of these represents either a success or failure that happened because either I was not bold when I should have been, or too bold too early. And I can go back and look at these, and I will, and I do. So for instance, the C-suite, taking and keeping a seat at the table, new role, new lessons. When I took this role, and it was tough, imposter syndrome started happening, all these things started creeping in. I looked back at some of the other things, like never ask permission to do your job. I looked back at times in my career where I'd been promoted before, and I leaned on those successes that I survived it. Sometimes just surviving it's the success you need to move you forward, uh, in order to propel me and to keep me at the table, to keep me coming back and not giving up, to keep, I had, uh, I think when you join a leadership team, especially when you have a coaching background, an agile background, and you're the only one on your leadership team that has both of those or any of those, uh, you have to be careful because you can't coach your peers, right? I wasn't at the table as a coach. I was at the table as a chief delivery officer. And so it was a real balancing act, and learning to have a different voice for your different role was a challenge. I went back and read some of my journals, some of my stories, and it would keep me showing up and not shrinking back or just getting tired and giving up. So I really suggest you guys, if you're not already I keep specific journeys. I I have a couple that I lean on, and my bold journey is one of them. I also have a failure journey. But my bold journey is the one that bolsters me. Like this is the I'm freaking Jennifer Fields journey, right? And it shows what I've done and what I've overcome. So I really encourage you to you know, write your stuff down, create your stories, whether you think in bullets or paragraphs. It will absolutely help you in your efforts to lead and shape folks. Rebecca, can you give us a brief so everyone can hear your comment?
Would you like to unmute, Rebecca, and tell us your story? Oh,
I'm with you.
I unmuted you, I believe.
Oh, good. Thank you. Sorry, I'm new to Butter and I was like, why can't I hide? Why can't I find what I'm looking for? But yeah, I had a couple teams I worked with where I played a little bit too friendly with the team, I guess. Friendly seems like the wrong word because I think I am friendly as a coach, but where I just wanted to keep it really chill for them and, make myself accessible in that way. And what I found was that sort of the more comfortable and, like I say, the more we were hanging together socially, the more challenging I found it to actively coach them. And it was really about playing sides. So if there was like half the team that I was spending most Friday nights with, and then half the team that I wasn't, now I felt weirdly, it seems weird if I'm on their side. It seems weird if I'm not on their side. It was like, I just learned from that. I have to be a little careful and cautious about that kind of thing when I'm coaching a particular group. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And it's an interesting balance because you need to build a relationship for people to feel that you're invested,
Right.
and for them to actually receive feedback in a positive way. I think if I don't think someone is, I know this, I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but if I have no relationship with you at all, what you say, I will listen to all feedback, but it just does not have the same weight.
Right.
It just doesn't. So you have to build enough relationship, but then when you have that balance of when it gets where you're starting to feel like you're holding back, or you're worried, or am I going to appear like I'm showing favoritism, all that. And that's any kind of leadership. It is a line, it's a balance, for sure.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they're feeling it. I mean, it would be interesting, Rebecca, for you to actually have a session with the team if you feel comfortable and say, this is where I'm at. This is how I'm feeling. And I'm going to experiment with sort of reducing this type of time. Is anyone else feeling this? It would be really interesting to see what their perception is.
Yeah, I'm no longer with the team, but what I did do at the time was the folks that I was not as close with, I did meet with them to say, I'm worried that it looks like I'm on this side and pushing you. Like, are you feeling that? Is this in my head? And we had sort of an open dialogue because they were feeling it and they were like, it's not like you can't be friends with them. I don't want you to not hang out with them socially,
Right.
But yes, you're not wrong. I do feel a bit of that sometimes. And I was like, okay, I'm glad that it's out in the open, because then at least I want you to know I'm actively trying to not be that way. And I also want you to feel like you can call out, like whether you send me a little note or you wiggle your ear at me or whatever. And it's like, this is our signal for like, I feel like you're doing it, or, so that helped.
Well done. See, that would go on your timeline. Mike, you had a question, I think.
I think it's been sort of answered. I was going to ask Rebecca. So although that sounds like a very potentially uncomfortable situation, I'm wondering whether it could actually work, given a different team, a different situation, a different time.
Yeah, I think the ultimate ending was I moved off the team, which was a mutual decision. I just think sometimes you have to change it up, and I'd been with them quite a while. So my time was spent. What helped was in my absence, they remembered their affection for me as a coach beyond just a friend. And so then when they wanted me to come back to the team to help with things, they were truly asking for coaching. And that was helpful.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think you're right, Mike. I think, again, we're dealing with humans. So there's not a cookie cutter. That's why you have to have lots of tools. And then you also have to be able to pivot and not use any of them and figure out a whole new way to deal with situations. 100%. So in my experience, fear is at the center. And I believe boldness with fear is courage. So if you go bold when you're scared, bejeebies, that's courage. And boldness without fear is confidence. And I think the only way you get better and feel more comfortable, more confident being bold is to do it. I wish there was a shortcut, but if there is, I haven't found it. And so my message, and I say this with all respect and love, if you are leading people in any way, shape, or form, I don't care what your role is, if you have influence and are leading people, you have to figure out a way to do it boldly, to be effective. You have to figure out how to navigate that from your perspective, from where you are, and find the tools and help and tricks that help you get through it. We just can't afford to have our leaders and our coaches not stepping up to the plate and shrinking back from being bold. We've all worked for those leaders and we don't want to anymore. So that is it for me. I so appreciate you guys have been a great group. If you any questions, anything like that, I also would love to hear from you guys. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect and or shoot me an email. I think Fred has my email available as well. But any questions, anything or any comments from anybody? I grabbed a couple little tips. Gail.
The mute button. Jennifer, were you at the Agile boot camp in North Carolina this past fall?
I was at the what was the name of that? I was at a coaching camp.
Yeah, the coaching camp. I'm sorry. Yeah,
yes, I was.
Yeah, I thought you looked familiar. Thank you. This was very good. I just wanted to say hello. I kind of remembered you. I remembered your accent.
I'm also going to be at Agile. So if you're in the area.
Yeah, I think I'm going to venture down there just because I was looking for a list of Agile events. So yeah, I'll be down there.
Yeah, because I'm going to be there. I'm speaking on the mystery of the frozen middle, talking about middle management, middle leadership. So would love to see you again.
Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for Jennifer? I have one. Let me. As you're talking, Jennifer, one thing came into my brain is how has being a woman played into this? Because I know sometimes in the workplace, a woman being bold and a man being bold are viewed very differently.
Thanks a lot, Fred, for going.
Or is that like a whole nother hour?
No, you can't. I will have to. First of all, let me just qualify and say, I'm 56, so I was in the workforce as a developer. In that point, we're called programmers, to be honest, for 10 years before I ever worked with another female in IT. I was told early on that if I was going to be successful, I had to not be a girl and act like a girl. It was even my first manager actually suggested I wear turtlenecks. To be honest, you can't make this stuff up. But what I learned early on is if I got angry, loud, which I don't do very often, but if I got direct, I was labeled emotional, and sometimes called a bitch. Whereas if my male counterparts, I had one of my peers where he would like he looked like the robot from Lost in Space. His arms would be flailing and he'd get really loud, and he just was really passionate. It's not like he was screaming, but that was just the way. But he was called passionate. Oh, David, he is so passionate about his. And then when I was just being, emotional. And those words have very different connotations. And so what I had to start doing is not letting their labels change my approach. But I also had to learn, and people say it's not fair. Well, life's not fair. I had to learn to choose my words differently. Like I had this habit of saying, well, I'm afraid if we do this, this will happen. I'm afraid and one day I thought that word triggers them, because when men hear afraid, they think they need to fix it, right? And me being a female and saying I'm afraid is not helping my cause. So I stopped using that word because I really wasn't afraid. I was concerned, right? And so then I would look for other words that would resonate and take, like, not force this response from them, because like it or not, I was dealing with all men for most of my career. So it did change things, and I got a lot of, very derogatory comments. But I think, again, I had a wonderful father who raised a very strong female leader. And I would always go back to who I knew I belonged to and who I was. And I would not let what they thought change who I was, to any big degree. But you're right. I got a lot of, you're just being so emotional. You're just being so emotional. And I'm like, if you only knew how emotional I was. I also, Fred, of this one manager, and he was a nice guy. He said once, Jennifer, I love how blunt you are, but I always am just waiting for the tears after you get angry. Yep. Yep. He was waiting for the tears. And, those are times where you have to tap into yourself, and you have to just wave off. Like I have a little LCD that I wave off, like, nope, not going to do that one. Not going to say that one. Because again, it's a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I wasn't going to fix him. I wasn't going to change him. So I just had to let that one roll away and move forward. And he's long retired, and I'm still working. And I made it to 2 levels above where he ever got. And so sometimes you just have to, again, I got that in my journey line. I can look back at that and say, I survived that and I made it. So I can write a chapter for Bob. I love it.
I turned on the sound. Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think we're just about out of time, so I'm going to make 2 comments, but I'm going to make the first one as a throwaway comment. What you just said now is quite interesting in the against the backdrop of cultural dynamics.
Mhm.
So we have a lot of Indian ladies that we deal with, and then just culturally that boldness it can come across really badly in a different culture. But I don't want to go down that road too far. I did want to make a comment about what you've written here. Boldness with fear is courage. I agree. Boldness without fear is confidence. At first I agree, but then I thought to myself, is boldness without fear only confidence, or can it come across as arrogance? And so, even though it doesn't fit as nicely, is it boldness with humility in the face of fear is confidence?
Perhaps. I think for me, I am I can be pretty arrogant. I always say that I'm not conceited, I'm convinced. Again, my dad maybe overdid it in raising confident daughters, but I think what I'm trying to say there, Mike, is that if you get and do it enough, if you go bold and you learn and you really hone your skill of being bold, you will gain the confidence to do it without pause, without angst. You know what I mean? And the only way you get to that level, being confident to be bold, is to do it.
I agree. I fully understand and I agree with the sentiment you're trying to convey. It's just that if you take that to its natural extreme, and me being OCD, I,
Mm-hmm.
I do, I worry that eventually that can lead to overconfidence, which is arrogance. And so always put a little bit of a dusting of humility in what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, that's true. I think life normally takes care of that for me anyways. I once I get to the point where I'm not having any humility and get something comes along and just knocks me back down. It's it's super how that works. But I like that. I may reword that a little bit. Thank you for the suggestion. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
it won't fit quite as nicely, but yeah.
Well, I can weave it in. I appreciate the call out.
Just trying to be bold.
I love it.
All right. As we get towards the end, I wanted to, hopefully this is still coming out, talk about our next couple of sessions we have coming up. So in 10 days, Arturo Marganeri will be here. Many of you might have seen him online before. We don't have the details in there yet. Then I will be hosting Pratik Singh in early April. We'll probably talk about Kanban, probabilistic forecasting. So Pratik and I are still working that out. And then Jim Highsmith towards the end of April. Those are our next few sessions. So we'd love to see you at one of those sessions. I'm trying to figure out how can I stop my screen share. It popped me out. Nope. Oh, there we go. Stop sharing. There we go. Awesome. Well, that is it. So I want to thank y'all for joining us this morning, this afternoon, and this evening from around the globe at the virtually Agile meetup. Connect with Jennifer. Connect with me. Give Jennifer some love from the soundboard for sharing her story about being bold. And with that, y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next time.